our top story tonight. It's been a weekend like few others when it comes to Indian diplomacy. India scored a major diplomatic success by achieving the highly successful Delhi Declaration at this weekend's G20 Summit. But, as always, politics is playing out at home. While few in the opposition have questioned the extravagance of the global event, some have questioned the manner in which the summit became, as they say, a Modi-centric or a BJP-exclusive event. The government says the opposition should have joined in the celebrations at a time when they claim the world is hailing India as a Vishwa Guru. It's our top story tonight.
नई दिल्ली G20 लीडर्स समिट डिक्लेरेशन पर सहमति बनी है। मैं इस डिक्लेरेशन को एडॉप्ट करने की घोषणा करता हूं।
A global event that concluded with consensus facilitated by host India. Yet unity and consensus have proven elusive for the opposition at home. RJD chief Lalu Yadav has raised concerns about extravagance and questioned how ordinary Indians stand to benefit from the G20 summit held in New Delhi.
लोगों को बुला के इतना खर्चा कर रहे देश का प्रसिद्धि बर्बाद नहीं कर देश के आम जनता को क्या फायदा हो।
Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi added a touch of satire. She referred to the G20 as their event or इनका in Hindi.
आज सुबह तो मैंने देखा कि इनके G20 जब हो रहा था तो बारिश आई और सारा जितना भी वो जहां पे वो G20 की मीटिंग रख रहे हैं उसमें सारा पानी फैल गया है।
But her party colleague MP Shashi Tharoor from the south lauded the G20 in New Delhi as a diplomatic triumph for the country.
So the Delhi Declaration is undoubtedly a diplomatic triumph for India. It's a good achievement because right until the G20 Summit was being convened, the widespread expectation was there would be no agreement and that therefore a joint communique might not be possible. We might have to end up with a chairman's summary.
Finally, the Congress chief weighed in, demanding that the Prime Minister shift his focus to a range of domestic issues. The presence of West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee at the G20 dinner sparked strong reactions from the Congress and a swift response from her party.
নৈশ ভোজের আমন্ত্রণে সাড়া দিয়ে আগ বাড়িয়ে পৌঁছে গেলেন দিল্লি। নৈশ ভোজে না গেলে কিছু হতো না, আকাশ ভেঙে পড়তো না।
ममता बनर्जी ये कह के गई है कि देश का सम्मान के लिए, राष्ट्रपति जी का सम्मान के लिए वो G20 डिनर में गई है।
The ruling BJP may hope to reap political dividends from the G20 in the election season. The opposition appears to be at odds and grappling with the challenge of redirecting the narrative towards pressing local issues. Bureau Report, India Today.
The political divide has sharpened as always. But we want to raise the big question. The central question is, has India really become a Vishwa Guru? Or is that hype? Or is there substance to it? Is this India's moment in a way on the global high table? That's the question I'm going to pose. My first guest on this is Amitabh Kant, and later I'll be joined by Shashi Tharoor. Mr. Kant, G20 Sherpa, congratulations first of all on the success of the G20 summit. You've been going through endless negotiations night after night. Have you been able to sleep, and have you finally been able to catch up on some sleep after all these hectic days?
Well, not yet, but I'll duly make up for it in the coming days.
You'll make up for it in the coming days, but I must ask you this. While we do this post-mortem in a way of the G20 summit, one word that I've heard very often, particularly in government circles, is India's arrival as Vishwa Guru, India's Vishwa Guru moment as a global leader. Do you really believe that we are on the way to becoming a Vishwa Guru, or is that hype more than substance immediately after the summit concluded successfully?
Well, I would term it as a moment for being a Vishwa Mitra, because the consensus document which has come out across all issues really demonstrates India's unique ability to bring emerging markets and the developed world together, including Russia and China. It's also a voice for multilateralism. It's a voice for the global South. It's a very, very strong voice of putting development and growth center stage. And I think it's a very powerful New Delhi leaders declaration. I don't think a declaration of this nature has come out before from G20, and I think it needs to be studied and examined. I would say that this is a unique moment because there were several complexities on issues of climate, on energy. There were challenges on the geopolitical issue. We've managed to bring everybody together and bring out a consensus, a fully consensus document on all issues, which to my mind is a very unique achievement of India.
You know, it's interesting you're using the word Vishwamitra and not Vishwaguru. In that sense, it appears you are suggesting that India's role at G20 was much more of a bridge builder rather than telling the world in which direction they have to go. Am I broadly correct that, broadly speaking, the new wordage that you would prefer is Vishwamitra and not Vishwaguru?
Well, I won't say anything on that count. That's not my objective. I mean, my task is to really deliver a good G20 in terms of its content. My job was not to get caught up on these issues. My job is very professional job of working with different countries, both emerging markets and developed world, and to bring out a unique document and unique New Delhi leaders declaration, which is what I worked for, really. I don't want to get caught up in, semantics over this.
No, you don't want to get caught up in semantics, Mr. Kant. Fair enough. But let's look at then the content. As you said, the document, all the paragraphs, 80 plus represent, you're saying, a broad consensus. Now, there will be those who, having read it, will say all it does is restate first principles, whether it is in the context of what happened in Ukraine, where it doesn't specifically mention Russia, but speaks on general principles of the UN Charter against territorial aggression, or whether it's on climate change, or whether it's on sustainable growth, it only restates first principles. What do you believe is concrete and substantive from this document that you believe is the one big takeaway that reflects the essence then of the Delhi Declaration?
So first, that it's a very strong call for bringing growth and development center stage. It focuses on very strong, inclusive, sustainable growth. It focuses on accelerating the pace of sustainable development goals because the COVID has impacted a vast segment of population. It focuses very strongly on a green development pact between the G20 countries, laying emphasis on both climate action, climate finance, global biofuel alliance. It focuses on green hydrogen. It focuses on ending plastics. It focuses on the lifestyle for environment, life initiative, whole range of initiative on green development pact. It then focuses on multilateral institutions for the 21st century because you need finance for both SDG and for climate action. These institutions were constituted in the post-Bretton Woods period, post-World War II. They need to be restructured and redesigned, which it talks about with consensus. And then it focuses very strongly on technological development and digital public infrastructure. For the first time, the world has accepted the definition of digital public infrastructure and the framework to accompany DPIs, which are open source, open APIs, are interoperable. And therefore, I think India has made a big headway on that. And lastly, the document focuses very strongly on women-led development, that's women empowerment and gender equality. It's a very unique document on laying emphasis on women empowerment. So all these are very key features. And lastly, I must say that there's a focus on creating a more inclusive world by bringing in African Union as a member of the permanent member of the G20. So these are the broad key highlights of the New Delhi leaders.
Mr. Kant, there is no doubt that bringing in the African Union, which you just mentioned, into the G20 must be seen as a major achievement, no doubt about it. But do you really believe that the balance of power between the global south and the powerful Western nations has been truly redrawn? Are you really seeing that countries will actually now walk the talk on critical issues of climate finance, of ensuring that the war in Ukraine ends? Will the concerns of the global south on debt restructuring actually be acted upon? Will all of this remain only on paper?
So if you look at the document I think this is the first document which the G20 has produced. And let me clearly say that G20 is not G7. It comprises also of emerging markets. And therefore, there's a whole focus on the global south. There's a whole focus on developing countries. There's a big focus on emerging markets. And that is why on both climate action, climate finance, or the reform of the multilateral institutions, the global south has had a big say. Before we started the G20, the Prime Minister had held a meeting with all the leaders of the global south, 125 leaders, taken their priorities. And therefore, this document is really a document of the global south in many ways. The number of times you will see developing countries emerge out of this document is quite extraordinary. And the concerns and their voice has been greatly felt in this document. And I would really request all of you to kindly read through this document because it's highly inclusive, it's very, very decisive, and it's very action-oriented.
Now, you've used the word inclusive, Mr. Kant, several times already. Now, let me turn to some of the contentious issues. How much of this summit success, or indeed this inclusivity that you speak about, the consensus building, was because of the Prime Minister's personal intervention, his personalized style of diplomacy? I recall interviewing you 1 year ago when you'd just taken over as G20 Sherpa, and you said you were going to take G20 across India, and you did that with 220 meetings over 60 cities. But critics are saying the Prime Minister has then used this to boost his domestic image, that while we talk of Vasudevam Kutumbakam for the world, of one family, one world, have we been able to do that in India as well? Actually build bridges within this country?
So G20 is basically, when India hosts the G20, the leader of G20 is the Prime Minister. It has to have his stamp. It has to have his vision. It's a leadership-driven organization, and I am the Sherpa to the Prime Minister of India, and therefore I implement what the leader desires in this. And his vision was to take G20 to all the states of India, to 60 cities of India, to make it a people-centric G20. That's very unlike what other G20s are about. They are held in one city or two cities. So that's his vision. His vision was that we should only give one district, one product gifts. His vision was that we should utilize millets. His vision was that we should bring in digital public infrastructure as a very major component of our presidency. His vision was that women-led development should be a very major criteria of our G20 presidency. All this, there's a huge India narrative into the New Delhi leaders' statement. And this has all been driven at the highest level by the Prime Minister. His vision was that our motto should be one earth, one family, one future. His vision was that it should be revolved around Vasudev Kutumbakam. Therefore, all this is really being driven at that level.
But was the Prime Minister's vision also to, in a way, identify G20 with his own personality? Because we are now entering an election year, is G20 being used in some way to build the Prime Minister's larger-than-life image, as I said earlier at the start, to build him as a Vishwa Guru, or dare I say now, as you say, Vishwa Mitra?
Rajdeep, I don't think we should bring politics into this issue at all. the G20 has been very professionally organized. It's been a stupendous achievement in terms of being able to arrive at a consensus document, not merely on all growth and development issues. This is the first document with 83 paras, without a bracket, without a footnote, without any reservation whatsoever. All countries across 20 countries, plus the 9 invited countries, plus all the international organizations agree to it 100%, taking it forward. I do not think it has anything to do with politics. We have been able to give a different perspective and bring everybody around and take this forward. There are components of it which come in from various other parts of the world, but the India narrative is fully intact there in a very big way.
You know, the reason I brought in the politics is because your fellow Stephanian, Congress MP, Shashi Tharoor, with whom you had a bit of a Twitter exchange, said, and I quote him now, this diplomatic triumph makes it all the more a pity that the government does not bring the same attitude of conciliation and cooperation to bear in its domestic dealings. The failure to invite the leader of the opposition, indeed any opposition MP, to any of the G20 events, receptions, dinners, underscores my point. No other democracy would snub its parliamentary colleagues on a global stage like this. A pity that the spirit of accommodation that prevailed at G20 is absent within Indian politics. How do you respond to what Shashi Tharoor has to say on this criticism?
No, I have the greatest regard and respect for Shashi Tharoor, but I saw at the dinner, I saw all the opposition chief ministers were there. Mr. Stalin was there, Mr. Nitish Kumar was there, the Jharkhand chief minister was there. Everyone was there from opposition side. I mean, there were many, many chief ministers. They are running the states. They came and met all the top leaders of the world. They were, I met them personally there. So I don't think that would be a correct criticism of the government on this.
Okay, but some of the Congress chief ministers did not attend. Leader of opposition was not invited. You're saying there was not a conscious decision in any way at any stage to keep anyone out. Am I correct?
I don't think there was any intention of that nature by the government, and I don't want to get caught up in these issues at all.
Okay, let's look at the larger picture once again. There's now talk, Mr. Kant, of a virtual summit in November before India's presidency ends. What is this virtual summit going to be about? What is the need, you believe, for a virtual summit now that the declaration is in place and Brazil is all set to take over the presidency of the G20?
So Brazil takes over on the 1st of December. We had advanced our presidency, but our presidency remains till the 1st of December, till the 30th of November, really. We have a lot of time. That is the entire September, October, November, till end November. So what the Prime Minister has desired is that on the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, and quite often happens that G20 statements really remain on paper. He wants us to drive them in terms of execution with different countries, different states, their number of India-related issues, drive them to implementation, and then have a virtual summit to review it, to review the action taken. And that, to my mind, would be the right thing to do. We have 2.5 months, and plenty of things need to be done during the course of our presidency. So we'll take them forward.
So what you're saying in a way is that this virtual summit in November will be a final act, a kind of review of what we've achieved, the hits and the misses. Is that the purpose, sole purpose then of having another virtual summit in November?
That's right. To review the outcomes of the document, as well as many other things which we'd like to cover, which the leaders would like to talk about. So this is an occasion for leaders to interact. You know, there's the good thing about the new Leaders Summit is not merely the document being achieved with full 100% consensus on all issues, but the meeting and the talking to each other is that connection is very important amongst global leaders. And I think when they do a virtual summit again in end of November, we'll have to do a lot of spade work, a lot of homework. We'll do that. And to my mind, that will be a very good initiative.
You know, one issue which needs clarification is the amount of money that you've spent on the G20. Some are suggesting we've spent 6 times the amount that countries like Germany spent on the summit. We've spent way more than what Indonesia spent on last year's Bali summit. Is that true? Figures on the net suggest that more than 4,000 crores, could even go up to 10,000, have actually been spent. The hoardings that we see all across the country. One report said just from the Delhi airport to the US President's Hotel, there were over 920 G20 ads, 25% of them featuring the Prime Minister. Can you tell us how much was actually spent? Do we have a real number of how much was spent on the G20?
Rajdeep, let me tell you that don't go by fake news. You know, this is absolutely nonsensical news that we've spent 4,332 crores. Absolutely incorrect, improper, fake news. And I would request you in particular not to go by this kind of fake news. There was a budget approved, which was far lesser, and we've spent less than the budget, than the approved budget by the government. So the budget approved is, the expenditure is far less than even the budget approved. So I would suggest that you just wait for the expenditure to be cross-corrected, everything, and these figures will be there in the public domain. So the approved budget is there, and we have spent even much lesser than that. And I would request you not to get carried away by some incorrect and improper tweet by someone.
So I'm not getting carried away. I'm asking for clarification. Do you have a rough estimate, then a ballpark figure, sir, of how much the G20 summit has cost?
That is still being compiled. The event has just concluded yesterday. It is being compiled by our logistic division. Everybody will get to know what is the expenditure. There's an approval, and the expenditure is less than the approval, actually.
Okay. We'll keep a track of the expenditure, but you mentioned in one of your statements post the summit that this is a victory for Team India. You worked with a team of very fine young IFS officers. For you personally, what has been the biggest learning over the last year? You've been a bureaucrat for decades. What's the new learning you had as the G20 Sherpa?
That you have to be professionally very well prepared. You know, the negotiators from across the world are very tough. They know strategically what they want to achieve. They're very professional. And India needs to build up a team of very strong professionals. I think in our negotiations, we've done some very, very tough negotiations. This has been an incredibly tough negotiation spreading over weeks and weeks and weeks and months. And India needs to have continuity in its negotiators over a long period of time with full professional expertise. That'll make you win for the country. I think what has won this year is that we had a team of very top-class, good drafting team. We had a very good top-class negotiators and some really outstanding young officers who worked with us to deliver this presidency for India.
You know, one final question, Mr. Khan. You said that this is, you told me a year ago that this was going to be your last big hurrah. I recall you saying something like this in an interview you gave me, that, this is it, and then you're going to quit the government. Your last big project, in a sense, with the government. Now there is some buzz that next general election, a lot of retired IAS, IFS officers could contest the election. We asked Harsh Ringla, the G20 coordinator, former foreign secretary, yesterday whether he would contest from Darjeeling. He didn't rule it out. Are you also someone who might be considering moving from being a bureaucrat who's worn various hats to possibly now contesting elections or entering political life, Mr. Kant?
Rajdeep, I have no such political ambition. I just want to read and write, and I prefer to write and do some intellectual work. So I'll do that. I just want to relax and take life easy. I worked for a very long time in government, and I now like to chill out a little bit.
So how does Amitabh Kant chill out? Are you going to play more rounds of golf? Are we going to see a book on the G20 here? Are you going to go back to your original home state of Kerala, where you were a bureaucrat with incredible with the Kerala tourism campaign, play golf somewhere or discover maybe a course in Kerala, or just sit by the beach?
No, I of course do a lot of physical exercise, and I play golf and I play several games, but I do that as a daily part of my daily existence. But I would prefer to read and write, and I've written several books, and I'd prefer to write another book on my own experiences of G20 rather than doing anything else. But I'm not cut out for politics.
Okay, you're not cut out for politics, but you made an emphatic statement here but you are cut out for diplomacy, and you've done a rather remarkable job over the last year putting it all together. Thank you so much, Amitabh Kant, for joining us here on as we look back at the G20 Summit. Okay, we've heard there from Amitabh Kant. Let's now listen to the other side. What does Shashi Tharoor, the Congress MP, have to say? Okay, so we've heard from the government. Let's now hear from the opposition. Joining me now is Thiruvananthapuram MP Shashi Tharoor, a former Minister of State for External Affairs, joining me from New York. Appreciate your joining us, Dr. Tharoor. Let me start with the same question that I asked Amitabh Kant a short while ago, which was, is India now on its way to becoming a Vishwa Guru? Is G20 India's Vishwa Guru moment, or is that hype and exaggeration?
Look, no, it's just not a terminology that we use. This is something the government has been very fond of using. I think that there is always a concern that many of us old-fashioned people have, that statements of that imply a pretension that could offend foreign countries. I mean, no one wants to be told that one country is guru to the rest of them. And clearly, there is a certain amount of, shall we say, pretension involved in giving ourselves a label like that. I would have much preferred it if other countries had called us a Vishwa Guru or a world leader or any other such term. But for us to dub ourselves in that way is frankly a little embarrassing.
But let's look at the G20 summit. Do you accept that it's been an unqualified success purely in diplomatic terms? Would you concede that therefore it's a huge feather in the cap of the government of India, and i.e. the Modi government?
Look, I've definitely praised the extraordinary success in delivering an outcome document, agreed joint communique, which frankly had looked as if it was not going to be happening even when the world leaders were assembling in Delhi. So it takes a tremendous amount of diplomatic skill and adroitness to pull that off. And I give my absolute unconditional applause to the team, the G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant, the Foreign Minister Jaishankar, and the very able and skilled diplomats at all levels, who did all that was necessary to pull off such a difficult feat. I think that shows Indian diplomacy at its best, the ability to work with all sorts of countries. I understand they got the Saudis on board, the Indonesians on board, other countries came along to try, the Brazilians, for example, and they were able to persuade both the Russians and the Chinese on the one hand, and the West on the other, to agree to language that fell short of the ideal wishes of either side. That's skillful diplomacy, and that I think every Indian should be proud of, that we have accomplished something which, frankly, almost everybody was writing off as unthinkable. So I would say, shabash, 100 on 100 for that. I would also praise them for their efforts to make it a bit of a people's G20. I don't think any previous chairmanship of the 18 other G20s that have been held involved so much of involving the public of a host country, giving it a lot of public salience. We had this University Connect, and we had the Hornbill Festival, and we had think tank gatherings and civil society C20s and all sorts of things which other G20 gatherings had not thought of and had not done so with so much of fanfare and so much of extensive outreach. And that, too, I think, is a feather in the cap of the Indian chairmanship. But there is a downside.
But listening to you, before I come to the downside, just the 3 minutes that you just gave me praising the government will lead many to believe is Shashi Tharoor switching sides.
Absolutely not, because the downside, unfortunately, is what matters in domestic circumstances. I think the government domestically has really failed to show the same spirit of accommodation and conciliation that worked in working with the other countries in adopting the communique. They ostentatiously ignored the opposition when it came to extending invitations to any opposition MP, whether the leader of the opposition officially anointed with that title, a gentleman of cabinet rank, Mallikarjun Kharge, not invited. The MPs who belong to either the Standing Committee of Parliament on External Affairs and or the Consultative Committee chaired by the Minister himself on External Affairs, no opposition MP was invited to anything, not to attend the events and sit in the audience, not to be in any of the receptions, let alone to participate in the dinner. And I think this is a pity, because we are advertising ourselves simultaneously as the mother of democracy. And I have to say, Rajdeep, that no other democratic country would slight the opposition on an occasion of such magnitude. On the one hand, you're going all out, having a big extravaganza, and on the other hand, you are publicly snubbing your own opposition while wanting to be applauded for your democratic credentials.
But Dr. Tharoor, the fact is, when the presidential dinner was held during the G20 summit, invites were sent to all the opposition chief ministers, several of them, Mamata Banerjee, Hemant Soren, Nitish Kumar, MK Stalin, all attended. In the Congress, only Sukhvinder Singh Sukhu came. And according to the government, they've taken these G20 programs to every state, including opposition ruled states. So there's been no discrimination, claims the government of the day. The opposition has been challenged.
The fact is, Rajdeep, as you know, chief minister's principal responsibility is to run their own states. And foreign policy plays a very small role in their preoccupations. It is the opposition members of parliament who have a responsibility and a role in national and international issues. The opposition members of parliament on the Standing Committee on External Affairs and in the Consultative Committee chaired by the minister himself on External Affairs are the ones who we really should be looking at when we talk in terms of who should have been invited from the opposition. The leader of the opposition is symbolically the principal figure of the other side of the political divide in a democracy. And I think it's rather disappointing, to be putting it very bluntly, that Mr. Kharge was not invited, but many of us in the opposition who could perhaps have benefited from getting an insight into these discussions and rubbing shoulders with some of these characters weren't invited. That's fine. That's the government's prerogative. But it doesn't reflect well on a government that speaks of being a mother of democracy, that political parties representing some 63% of the electorate in terms of the last election were completely not represented. Chief ministers will come. Those who have no urgent preoccupations will be able to come. Those who have impending elections a couple of months away did not come, and that's not entirely surprising, because that's really where they have to focus. So I think we can understand the objection. As for having it everywhere in the country, that was obviously part of the government's outreach that I've already praised. The extension of the G20 into a sort of nationwide extravaganza also did the government a lot of good in terms of bringing the visage of the Prime Minister and of the government's significant role here to the attention of publics everywhere,
So you're saying if you had been invited, you would have gone. Am I correct? If Shashi Tharoor had been invited to attend the G20 summit dinner, you would have gone. There was no question of boycotting it. Am I correct?
No. There was no boycott. I can assure you that as a Congress MP, I received absolutely no instructions to boycott anything on this. And that's why, indeed, Mr. Sukhu, as a Congress CM, went. He doesn't have any immediate urgent election looming up. He can afford to take a day off and go to Delhi. Many others don't have that luxury. That's the difference. I mean, Mr. Gehlot and Mr. Baghel are facing elections literally a couple of months down the road. And I think I'd be very surprised if they felt they could spare the time for a social occasion with foreign visitors. That's the real difference.
Is part of the problem, though, the fact that the Prime Minister and the government has harnessed G20 very successfully to the image of Mr. Modi, made him larger than life, and that in an election year is what perhaps pushes the opposition on the defensive. The fact is the Prime Minister today is taking credit for a successful summit, and therefore the opposition finds itself in a very difficult position. Is that part of the problem here when you say that domestically the Prime Minister hasn't done enough to bring us on board? Is it because you fear that he towers over the entire summit and indeed therefore G20 equals Mr. Modi? This is Modi diplomacy, as it's being called. Like Modi-nomics, we've got Modi-plossy, if you want to use the word.
Modi diplomacy. Look, let me say very, very bluntly to you, Rajdeep, that this is not really about any individual leaders. It is actually about India. It is India that is being honored. India and foreign ministry, which consists of people who are not supposed to be political, who have done the hard work. It is, in fact, in many ways to the credit of India that its acceptance around the world is what it is. And this is the product of 75 years of hard work by successive Indian governments of all parties, including the current ruling party. But let's say that it's not an achievement of the ruling party alone, it's an achievement of the government of India. And there is that distinction that ought to be maintained in people's minds. But I have no doubt that the BJP will instrumentalize this in their PR. They've demonstrated this in the past. Even in the last election, a military action was sort of translated into somehow an action of the ruling party. You and I are cricket fans. You can be sure that the it's no accident, as they used to say in the old days. It is no accident, comrades, that all the key matches of the Cricket World Cup are taking place in the Narendra Modi Stadium. And we'll hear that name time and time again throughout the World Cup. I mean, this is the way in which this government has absolutely gone out of its way to take political mileage out of every national event in a way that no previous government, either of the same party or of any other party, has ever done. But whether you admire that or not is up to you. Obviously, we in the opposition tend to look askance at this sort of behavior, but it's exactly what the government has done before and probably will continue to do as long as they have a chance to do it.
So do you see the government getting huge political advantage in a general election as a result of G20, Chandrayaan before that, now you're bringing in the World Cup, all of this building the image that India has arrived on the world stage led by Prime Minister Modi? Do you see that becoming a big issue in the elections?
That's certainly going to be the line that many BJP will take. They've tried this in the past as well. In 2019 already, I heard this kind of argument when it was simply indefensible, because in fact the publicity that India was getting in those days was more negative than positive because of the incidents of bigotry and violence against minorities, which have also continued in this current second term of the government. So I have to say that it is not by any means, if you read the coverage in the international press, as I have been doing over the last few days, India has by no means been getting an uncritical coverage, Rajdeep. We've been getting a fair amount of flack for some of the things that's going on domestically in our country. But they will certainly go around telling the public that, look, we are universally admired, we are terribly popular, we've arrived. And they will overlook the fact that India arrived on the world stage a long time ago, going back to the 1950s, when Prime Minister Nehru was the person to turn to resolve everything from the Suez crisis to the initial conflicts in Indochina in the 1950s. I mean, India was always a force to reckon with in global diplomacy, and I'm proud that it still is. But I'm not going to suggest that this is to the credit of one political party. It is actually to the credit of India, the country we all belong to, and we are all very proud of.
So you're saying democratic backsliding, as it is called in India, is still a concern, you believe, in global capitals. But despite that, it appears world leaders seem to be setting that aside and reaching out to India. Which brings me to my original question. Is this India's moment, or do you believe that these concerns are still valid concerns in global capital, including in America, where you are at the moment?
I assure you these are concerns. I hear it all the time from interlocutors in other democracies. But let me stress, Rajdeep, that the point about India's moment and so on, we have had many moments, we will have many moments in the future, and we must seize them. And I will give credit where credit is due. This was a good accomplishment. But let us never forget that every single example you gave, whether it's Chandrayaan, a space program that was started by a Congress Prime Minister in the late 50s, early 60s, in the teeth of a lot of criticism and skepticism, whether you're talking about our superpower status on the cricket field, whether you're talking about our extraordinary international acceptability around the world, a lot of this has been built up by governments of every stripe and hue. And I think it would be seemly of the Prime Minister and his party to give credit to those whose shoulders they're standing on as well. I'm not asking for, any ritual genuflections. I'm asking for them to speak about India all the time and not just about who is ruling India at the moment of a particular moment of triumph or satisfaction. Our country has a lot to be proud of, and I, as an Indian, I'm very, very proud Indian wherever I go. But when I see, for example, that comments about the fact that, on the one hand, we're talking about one world, one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, but inside the country, the ruling party is weaponizing identity politics. We are talking about how everyone must be included. Our declaration even talks about how all countries and communities must live together. And yet inside our own country, we are seeing very, very sad incidents of othering of our Muslim minority, and in Manipur of our Christian minority, not only in Manipur, in many other states there have been attacks on churches, even during the Christmas season. So there's been a lot that is noticed abroad. We've had, as you know, unfavorable mentions, not just in sort of professional human rights organizations reports, but even in a governmental body like the U.S. Committee on Religious Freedom has singled India out in a way that never used to happen with other governments in office. So let us just say that there is a lot we need to do better. We can speak about healing and harmony and hope on the international stage, all of which the G20 was supposed to be contributing to. But there is a lot of work to be done to ensure healing and harmony and hope inside our own country first.
Okay, so effectively what you're saying is you've got to walk the talk. It's one thing to have it in a global declaration. You want to see much more action of those fine words being translated into action on the domestic front. Shashi Tharoor.
That's right.
Thank you very much for joining me and giving us your perspective there from New York. Thank you.
Thank you, Raj.
Heard two contrasting views on the G20 summit. We leave you to decide whether you think India is on its way to becoming a Vishwa Guru or not, or is that mere hype? Let's turn from there to a story that shows that India certainly is getting greater space among global powers now. After attending the G20 summit, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman stayed back in India for his state visit. The reach out to Saudi Arabia is being seen as yet another achievement of the Modi government. Prime Minister Modi and the Saudi prince held bilateral talks where the Prime Minister called Saudi Arabia one of India's most important strategic partners and insisted that this would be a relationship that would go a long way. Remember, Saudi Arabia could play a key role in the proposed corridor linking India, Middle East and Europe.
सऊदी अरब में रहने वाली भारतीयों के हितों की सुरक्षा और उनके कल्याण के लिए आपकी प्रतिबद्धता के लिए हम आपके बहुत बहुत आभारी हैं। भारत और सऊदी अरब की मित्रता क्षेत्रीय और वैश्विक स्थिरता, समृद्धि और मानव कल्याण के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है।
I congratulate you on the management of the G20 Summit and the initiatives achieved, including the economic corridor. The Indians in Saudi Arabia had a large part in the economic growth of Saudi Arabia. Today, they are 7% of the population of Saudi Arabia, and we consider them to be a part of Saudi Arabia. We watch and take care of them like we take care of our own citizens.
Let's turn to tonight's Get Real India story. These are all being built as smart cities, but one day of torrential rainfall and our smart cities are not so smart. The latest is Lucknow, which got flooded out today. Parts of the city waterlogged after only a few hours of rain. Residents are holding local authorities responsible for a poor drainage system. So whatever happened to the smart cities? It's our Get Real India story.
Lucknow is one of the cities selected for smart city projects. The city of Nawabs, however, was anything but smart on Monday. The Uttar Pradesh capital was flooded after a few hours of rains. The rains forced closure of schools in Lucknow. The school in Gomti Nagar was in knee-deep water, leaving it in no condition to hold classes.
यहाँ पर कैमरामैन संजय आपको तस्वीर दिखाएंगे। ये एक क्लास है, आपको इस क्लास को हम बाहर से ही दिखाएंगे, काफी अंधेरा अंदर है। वो तस्वीर भी आप देखते चलिए कि किस तरह से क्लास पूरा जलमग्न हो चला है। क्लास केजी है, यानी केजी छोटे-छोटे बच्चे यहाँ पर आते हैं। वो तस्वीर आपको मैं यहाँ पर दिखाने की कोशिश यहाँ पर लगातार कर रहा हूँ।
Commuters heading to their offices were badly hit. Many were angry over the state of the city.
जब लखनऊ की ये हाल है तो आसपास के जगहों के तो क्या ही गैस किया जाए, और कहीं ना कहीं सब वो है कि समय के साथ
नहीं लग रही आपको?
नहीं, हमें तो नहीं लग रही कहीं से भी।
बिल्कुल नहीं भैया, बिल्कुल नहीं। देखिए पूरा हम डूब चुके हैं।
क्या विकास है? एक नगर पालिका के अगर साल भर में 2-4 बार एक सी सफाई नालों की हो जाती है, पानी निकल ना जाए।
यहाँ बगल में हाई कोर्ट है, यहाँ पे जज साहब बैठते हैं यहाँ पे, ठीक है। जज साहब को देखना चाहिए यहाँ पे, ये लखनऊ का विकास है ये।
Authorities claimed prompt action was taken after rain led to waterlogging.
हमारे नगर निगम की टीम पूरे लखनऊ के हर क्षेत्र में, हर जोन में इस समय काम कर रही है। जहां पर पंपिंग से पानी को निकालना है वहां पंपिंग से निकाल रहे हैं, जहां कहीं कोई अवरोध ड्रेनेज सिस्टम में है उसको क्लियर कर रहे हैं। उम्मीद ये है कि जल्दी से जल्दी हम जो वाटर लॉगिंग की प्रॉब्लम है उसको रिजॉल्व कर लेंगे।
The Met Department has predicted heavy rains for one more day. The authorities have ordered schools to be closed on Tuesday as well. With Samarth Srivastav, Bureau Report, India Today.
We hope, though, people will remain safe in Lucknow and other areas. Let's turn to tonight's Good News Today story. A 29-year-old Mohammad Qasim used to wash dirty plates at his father's Halim selling cart. He secured 135th rank in the UP Provincial Civil Service Examination. His inspirational story is our Good News Today. Take a look.
From helping his father sell Halim on the streets to becoming a civil judge, Mohammad Qasim has come a long way. The 29-year-old's family is celebrating after he secured the 135th rank in the Provincial Civil Service Judicial Examination. While in school, Qasim used to wash dirty plates on his father's handcart.
हलीम एक डिश होती है जो गेहूं और दाल से बनाई जाती है। तो 2007 से और 7-8 से लगभग मैंने अपना ठेला स्टार्ट कर दिया। मतलब अब्बा की जगह पे मैंने खड़ा होना शुरू कर दिया।
Despite these formidable challenges, Qasim's dreams were never put on hold. His father Bali Muhammad and mother Anisa inspired him to do better.
पूरे घर परिवार ने मुझे मोटिवेट किया, लेकिन अगर मैं किसी एक शख्स का नाम लूं कि जो मेरा सबसे बड़ा मोटिवेटर है, तो वो मेरी मदर है। उन्होंने मुझसे इस यकीन से कहा कि तू पढ़, तेरा आज नहीं तो कल सिलेक्शन हो जाना ही है। मैं उनकी उम्मीदों से बहुत डरता था।
Qasim left his father's business after he got admission in the Aligarh Muslim University. He completed LLB, LLM and cleared the UGC National Eligibility Test. Qasim's rise from a roadside vendor to a judge is a testament to sheer hard work and his family's unwavering belief in his potential. Bureau Report, India Today.